Welcome to the Land Acknowledgement Training. My name is Hue Schlieu. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a training specialist with St. Paul Public Schools, and I'll be doing the training today. We're going to cover why land acknowledgements are important. We're going to talk about the purpose and some components of a land acknowledgement so that you may put together a land acknowledgement as well. There'll be one example that I'll share from a colleague, and then we'll go over next steps of how you can take this short training and dive a little bit deeper. A land acknowledgement is a message at the beginning of a gathering or meeting, conference, classroom that acknowledges the people whose ancestral lands we are on. So why is it important for us to talk about this? Well, first and foremost, this land is not ours. We are on stolen land. There's been a history of genocide and oppression and ongoing displacement. Land acknowledgements also allow us to promote truth. Indigenous people have been erased or lied about in curriculum for so long that this is our chance to combat that reality. Indigenous people should be celebrated. Indigenous people are still here today, and we should celebrate the people, the culture, the history, and everything that exists outside of the violent colonialism that has happened. When speaking about the purpose, Sam Torres says that land acknowledgements are efforts to ensure the connection between Indigenous people and their land is not erased or forgotten. We know that we should do land acknowledgements, but who should do a land acknowledgement? The Honor Native Land Project says that we call on all individuals and organizations to open public events and gatherings with acknowledgement of traditional Native inhabitants of the land. And so that means that everyone should do it. When you're putting together a land acknowledgement, there are three components that you should make sure to have. The first one is to acknowledge the people whose ancestral lands you are on. If you are unsure of who this is, text your zip code to 907-312-5085 or visit native-land.ca to find out. The second component is to make visible both the history and current realities of Indigenous people. We say this because oftentimes we focus on the history of colonialism, and it's usually really harsh, and also it makes it sound like something that happened a long time ago and it's not relevant today. And the fact is, Indigenous people are still here. And so we need to take the opportunity to celebrate the people, celebrate the culture, celebrate the history outside of colonization, and celebrate the achievements of Indigenous people, past and present. But yes, also be honest about the history and consequences of colonization. The third component is to commit to action. There's an example that was given to me where a professor took a water bottle from a student and said, "I acknowledge that this water bottle is yours," and then sets it down. The student then asked, "Are you going to give me the water back?" And the professor said, "But I've already acknowledged that this water bottle is yours. Why do I need to do anything else?" And so if we're only doing land acknowledgements and we're not taking this a step further, it can be further harmful and traumatic to Indigenous communities, and it just doesn't make sense, right? We need to be working towards something more. And so it is not enough to just acknowledge the land and the people. We need to determine in what ways we want to make a difference, and we voice that out loud. I'm about to share with you the land acknowledgement that my colleague, Jocelyn Weedo from Sprockets, shared at the beginning of her virtual training. See if you can identify the three components as you listen.
And as we get started, I would like to acknowledge that where I live, work, and play are the ancestral and contemporary lands of the Dakota and Anishinaabe people. You can put in the chat if you are coming from a different location today outside of Minnesota, who it is that you want to honor. I share this land acknowledgement with you as I work to better understand the true history that has been misrepresented and buried in what I had been taught. There's a long legacy of broken treaties, violence, and ethnic cleansing, and forced removal that has taken place. This land holds historical and spiritual significance, and today I honor the elders past and present who have been and those who continue to be stewards to the land, languages, and practices that the U.S. government worked to take away. Truth and acknowledgement are important, but relationships and action are critical. I commit to continue to learn about these histories, connect with individuals and groups that are living and doing the work, lifting up the voices of indigenous people, and speak the truth.
Going beyond the three components, there are three considerations that I believe make land acknowledgements more powerful. The first one is to be intentional. Don't do land acknowledgements because this training told you to. Don't do land acknowledgements because um, everyone else is doing it, right? Find your why, find your purpose. And if you have to do it, take the opportunity to really dig deep and think about, what do you want your audience to know? What do you want your audience to learn, feel? How do you want them to interact with Indigenous people and culture? Like I had mentioned about the water bottle story, if a land acknowledgement is done without intentionality, it could serve to further harm or re traumatize Indigenous communities. The second consideration is to be relevant. Find ways that Indigenous culture or history or people connect with the topic of the day. Whether it's if you're a cooking teacher and you bring up Indigenous foods and way of life into your land acknowledgement. If another way to be relevant is if there's current events happening. If you're hearing news, whether it's positive or negative, bring that, incorporate that into the land acknowledgement, incorporate that into that time that you're setting aside. The last, but definitely not least, consideration is to be dynamic. Your land acknowledgements should change as your relationship and understanding of Indigenous people and history and culture changes. Um, Share what you're learning, share what you're hearing, share the growth, right? Because if you're reading the same land acknowledgement that you did 3 years ago, it's not going to have the same impact, not on you and not on your audience. So make sure that it's changing, it's relevant, and that it's intentional. So the next step after this training is to draft a land acknowledgement. There's an accompanying worksheet that you can use. Again, do not do land acknowledgements because I'm telling you to, but if you are interested and you feel comfortable, you feel ready, that next step is to just go ahead and write something down. And then get feedback from a friend. Sometimes when we write something with great intentions, it can still have a negative impact. And so having different perspectives look at your initial land acknowledgement is going to be helpful. In land acknowledgements, it's new, right? So it can be uncomfortable or feel kind of awkward to do. Go ahead and practice that, and that's okay. And then go ahead and share it. Share it at your next meeting. Share it at your next class. Just go ahead and share it. The first several times that I did land acknowledgements, it wasn't perfect, but knowing kind of how your audience receives it, the feedback you get, the reactions, all help you create a better land acknowledgement the next time with more intentionality, more impact. Yep, and then make changes as needed. And again, do this multiple times, right? Your land acknowledgements don't have to be the same, and they don't have to be different, but over an extended period of time, they should evolve as you evolve. So yeah, those are my tips. I hope that this training was helpful in your journey with land acknowledgements. There's a worksheet that you can look at that it has a one page summary of what we just all learned together. Thank you.